The truth is, most people aren't afraid of being alone. They're afraid of what they'll find when the noise finally stops. Because in that stillness, without the constant buzz of conversations, scrolling, or someone else's presence to lean on, you're left with something far more intimidating: your own thoughts. And that's where most people pull away. They run into distractions, into people, into anything that keeps them from sitting with themselves for more than a moment. But what if I told you the very silence you fear holds the exact strength you've been searching for? This video is part of an 8-part journey, each chapter diving deeper into what solitude, self-mastery, and Stoic philosophy can teach us about becoming whole, attracting without chasing, and finding peace that doesn't depend on anyone else. If these words speak to something deep in you, something raw, real, and ready to grow, then consider subscribing. A signal that you're not just drifting through life. You're choosing to walk this path with clarity, courage, and intention. Part 1. The pain of being alone. There comes a moment in nearly every person's life when the world grows eerily quiet. Not physically necessarily, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. A kind of silence that doesn't just surround you but sits inside you, heavy and still. It often begins innocently enough. A weekend without plans, a phone that stays face up but undisturbed, the absence of a call you were secretly hoping for but never truly expected. In this space, many people start to feel something they can't quite explain, a mix of restlessness and sorrow, doubt and longing, the subtle sense that maybe they've slipped out of sync with the rhythm of everyone else's life. It's as if you're watching the world from behind a glass wall, close enough to see it all unfold. Relationships blooming, friendships deepening, life milestones shared and celebrated, yet too far removed to feel like you're part of any of it. And it's in this strange emotional twilight, somewhere between stillness and unease, that the most pressing question emerges. Is there something wrong with me? It's not shouted or screamed. It's whispered quietly through the behaviors we begin to adopt in response, refreshing notifications more often than necessary, checking social media to compare your life to others, saying yes to plans you don't want just to fill the space. Beneath it all is a longing, not just to be with someone, but to be seen, to be chosen, to be validated in a way that tells us we're still part of something, that we matter, that we're enough. And yet, the longer you sit in that silence, the louder that inner fear becomes. It's not about just missing companionship. It starts to feel like you're missing purpose, identity, maybe even direction. The world around you doesn't make it any easier. Everywhere you turn, you're met with messages, some subtle, some screaming, that tell you being alone is a problem that needs solving. Romantic comedies end when two people find each other, not when one person finds themselves. Advertisements sell love as the reward for looking a certain way or buying a particular product. Even casual conversations are laced with the assumption that singleness is a temporary state, a waiting room for something better, a phase you need to graduate from. So, when you find yourself sitting alone on a Friday night with no one checking in and nowhere to be, it doesn't just feel like you're alone, it feels like you're failing. But what if that feeling, that ache, that perceived failure, isn't what it seems? What if being alone isn't a deficiency, but a doorway? What if the discomfort that bubbles up when the noise fades and the people vanish isn't a punishment, but an invitation? An invitation not to retreat into distraction or escape into shallow connection, but to walk deeper into the most overlooked relationship in your entire life, the one you have with yourself. That's the place most people avoid at all costs. It's easier to be liked than to be known, easier to chase validation than to face the parts of yourself you've buried under other people's approval. But when you're alone, truly alone, you have no choice but to confront what you've hidden. At first, it's terrifying. Silence has a way of amplifying every insecurity you've ignored. You start to hear the voices you drowned out with music, conversation, and constant movement. The ones that ask, "Are you really happy?" Or, who are you when no one's watching? It's not fun. It's not pretty. It doesn't feel like growth. It feels like unraveling. But what you don't realize, not yet at least, is that unraveling is often the first step toward rebuilding something stronger, because solitude, unlike loneliness, doesn't erode who you are. It reveals who you were always meant to become. Most people never experience the full strength of their own presence. They live as mirrors, reflecting back the expectations, desires, and energy of those around them. They adapt. They perform. They become versions of themselves that feel safe, acceptable, easy to love. But when you spend time in solitude, honest, unfiltered time, you start to notice which parts of you were never really you. The opinions you held, the goals you chased, the people you tried to impress, it all begins to fall away piece by piece. What remains isn't weakness, it's clarity, it's truth. And it's in that truth that power begins to take shape. You start to recognize your patterns, the way you reached for your phone when emotions felt heavy, the way you romanticized people who gave you crumbs of attention, the way you feared silence because it meant you had to face your own noise. Slowly, gently, you begin to stop running. You sit in the silence. You let the emotions come. You journal, not because someone told you to, but because it helps you make sense of the storm inside. You go on walks, not to get somewhere, but to remember what it feels like to just be. You stop asking, when will someone love me, and start wondering, how well do I love myself? You begin to radiate a different kind of energy, one that's not desperate, not performative, not trying to prove anything. It's calm, centered, rooted, and the world can feel it. People may not be able to explain why they're drawn to you, but they will be. Because confidence isn't built in crowds, it's forged in solitude. It's the byproduct of sitting alone with your fears, your doubts, your shadow, and choosing to stay anyway. That's where real strength is born. The pain of being alone, then, is not a curse. It's a calling to return to yourself, to strip away the noise, the expectations, the masks, and to meet the raw, real, beautiful human underneath. The one who's been there the whole time, just waiting for a moment of silence to speak. And when you hear that voice, your voice, for the first time in a long time, you'll realize that you were never truly alone. You just hadn't come home to yourself yet. Part 2. Redefining Solitude. It's strange, isn't it? How something as neutral as solitude, a simple state of being alone, can be so deeply misunderstood, misjudged, and even feared. The word itself has been coated with decades of emotional baggage, wrapped in warnings and stigma, until it's nearly indistinguishable from its more painful cousin, loneliness. And so, without even realizing it, we inherit a distorted view, one that sees solitude as a void to be filled, a season to escape, a punishment for not being chosen. But solitude isn't a prison. It's a portal. And if you dare to walk through it, not to escape it, what you find on the other side is something most people spend their entire lives chasing: peace without conditions. We live in a world that equates visibility with value. If people are texting you, inviting you, swiping on you, you matter. If your phone is silent and your weekends are open, something must be wrong. It's a warped way of measuring worth, but it's a deeply embedded one. It convinces you that your presence only matters when it's acknowledged by others. So solitude becomes this uncomfortable mirror, reflecting all the things you believe you lack. But here's the twist. Solitude doesn't create those fears. It just reveals them. The silence doesn't say you're unworthy. It simply stops covering up the noise that once drowned out your own doubts. To redefine solitude is to stop seeing it as emptiness and begin recognizing it as space, sacred, powerful space. Space to rebuild the parts of you that were never given time to grow. Space to clean out the residue of toxic patterns, bad relationships, half-truths you told yourself to survive. Space to reconnect with your own mind, not the one shaped by timelines and trends, but the one you had before the world told you who you should be. It's not the kind of space that feels immediately comfortable. In fact, the first thing you might feel is withdrawal. Not from people, but from the constant feedback loop that told you what to think, how to dress, what to want and who to be. Because when you're alone, really alone, you start to realize just how much of yourself was constructed by reaction. You liked certain things because someone you dated liked them. You posted in certain ways because that's what got engagement. You said yes to things not because you wanted to, but because silence was too awkward and you didn't want to seem difficult. Solitude reveals the blueprint, and once you see it, you can begin to draw something new. This isn't to say solitude is easy. Far from it. There will still be days when the silence feels too loud, when you miss people who probably weren't right for you, when you crave the messy thrill of being wanted, even if it cost you your peace. But here's what changes. Those cravings no longer control you. They come, you acknowledge them, and then, without panic, without judgment, you let them pass. Because you've built a life, even in solitude, that's full. Not always loud, but full of thought, of beauty, of meaning. And in that fullness, there's no longer a need to prove anything to anyone. You realize that solitude isn't something to be endured, it's something to be explored. Like a hidden room in a house you've lived in your whole life but never entered. At first it's unfamiliar, maybe even a little eerie, but as you spend time there, you begin to make it yours. You decorate it with your own rituals, morning stretches, quiet reading, deep thinking. You fill it with light, through learning, through reflection, through simply being honest with yourself. And eventually, it becomes your favorite room. The one you return to, not out of avoidance, but because it feels like home. And here's the irony. Once you start to fall in love with your solitude, people begin to notice. Not because you're suddenly trying harder, but because you're trying less. There's a different kind of energy that radiates from someone who's at peace in their own company. It's not cocky or cold, it's grounded, unshaken, magnetic. You walk differently, speak differently, make decisions from clarity, not scarcity. And that makes people curious. They wonder what you found, not realizing the only thing you discovered was the courage to stop needing them in order to feel whole. This is the essence of Stoicism, not to suppress feeling, but to understand that peace is not found in control over others, but in control over self. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Solitude teaches you that mastery. It teaches you that stillness is not laziness, that choosing to be alone is not choosing to be unloved, that in stepping away from the noise, you can finally hear your own wisdom rising to the surface. You stop grasping for attention. You stop shrinking to be accepted. You stop chasing what doesn't nourish you. And in that space, you grow, silently, slowly, with roots that run deep. Not the kind of growth that wins applause, but the kind that holds you steady when life inevitably shakes. Because when you've faced yourself in solitude, when you've wrestled your shadows, confronted your flaws, and loved yourself through all of it, the world loses its power to define you. You don't fear rejection because you no longer seek rescue. You don't fear silence because you've turned it into strength. And you don't fear solitude because you've redefined it. Not as a hole in your life, but as the soil where your best self takes root. So let the world keep spinning. Let others run toward distractions, toward quick fixes, toward loud rooms filled with empty connections. You're building something quieter, deeper, stronger. You're becoming someone who isn't afraid of their own thoughts. Someone who doesn't need to be chosen to feel valuable. Someone who walks into a room without asking for permission to exist. This is what solitude gives you. Not just space, but power. power rooted in presence, power rooted in peace. And the longer you stay in that solitude, the more you lean into it, not as exile, but as elevation. The more you realize, this isn't a pause in your life. This is your life, and it's beautiful. 3. Becoming whole. There's a strange and powerful moment that arrives after you've spent enough time in solitude, a moment when the silence no longer feels like absence, but arrival. You wake up one morning, maybe without even realizing it at first, and something is different. The space around you, the quiet, the stillness, the lack of external distraction, no longer feels like something is missing. It feels like something sacred. You aren't looking around for someone to text or reaching for validation through digital noise. You're not trying to escape the moment. In fact, for the first time in a long time, you feel at peace in it. You feel at peace in yourself. This is the beginning of wholeness. Not the dramatic, Instagrammable kind of transformation. Not the before and after montage with glowing skin, a six-pack and a high-paying job, but a deeper shift, an invisible one, the kind that happens in your nervous system, in your inner voice, in the way you breathe through your own emotions. Becoming whole isn't about never feeling lonely again or never wanting companionship. It's about no longer depending on it to define you. It's about no longer needing someone else's presence to feel present in your own life. For so long, many of us built our identities in relation to others. We defined ourselves through roles, partner, friend, caretaker, achiever, and shaped our actions around what we believed would keep people close. We learned, often unconsciously, to perform, to be easy to love, agreeable, attractive, desirable, impressive. We became versions of ourselves that were easier for others to digest, often without realizing we were shaving off the parts that made us real. And when those relationships ended, or when we found ourselves alone, we didn't just lose people. We lost the version of ourselves we had created for them. That's the part no one really talks about. How solitude doesn't just confront you with loneliness, but with an identity that feels hollow, like a costume you forgot you were wearing. And in that moment, the work of becoming whole begins. It's not glamorous, it's not fast. It's the slow, deliberate process of peeling back the layers, asking yourself what beliefs, habits, and emotional reflexes you inherited just to feel safe in a world that always expected more from you. You start to ask different questions, not "why am I alone?" but "who am I without the need to be liked?" Not "when will I be chosen?" but "what have I spent my life chasing, and why?" You begin to notice how often your peace was dependent on other people's moods, how often your joy was tied to someone else's attention, how often your sense of value rose and fell based on external reactions. And as uncomfortable as those realizations are, they are the gateway to liberation. Because once you see the strings, you can start cutting them. Once you see the pattern, you can stop repeating it. Becoming whole means reclaiming your sense of worth from the places you outsourced it to. It means validating your own experience, your own voice, your own needs, even when they aren't mirrored back to you. Especially when they aren't. You stop explaining yourself to be understood. Stop shrinking yourself to be accepted. Stop abandoning yourself just to be chosen. You start honoring what you actually want, not what you've been conditioned to think you should want. And for a while, this process might feel lonely, not because you're unloved, but because you're unlearning a version of love that required self-betrayal to receive. But over time, something shifts. You stop looking for people to complete you and start becoming someone who feels complete within themselves. You find comfort in your own routines, your own rituals, your own presence. You enjoy your company, not as a substitute for someone else's, but as something meaningful in its own right. And when someone enters your life, it's no longer to fix a hole in your soul. It's to walk alongside you as two whole beings, not two halves scrambling to feel enough. This kind of wholeness changes everything. It changes how you date, how you communicate, how you hold boundaries. It changes the kind of energy you attract, not because you're trying harder, but because you're not trying at all. You're just being honest, being grounded, being fully in integrity with yourself. And that's rare, that's magnetic, that's real. There's a quote often misattributed, but deeply true. You attract what you are, not what you want. When you are fractured, unsure, still seeking yourself in the eyes of others, you tend to attract people who reinforce that pattern, people who mirror your insecurity, not your growth. But when you are whole, you don't chase love. You recognize it. You don't fight for attention. You feel aligned. You don't settle for a connection that costs your peace. Because you are the peace. You've built it. And now you protect it. Part 4. Magnetic Energy. Something remarkable begins to happen when you stop chasing people and start choosing yourself. Not out of pride, not out of bitterness, but from a place of quiet clarity. That's when you realize you've crossed an invisible threshold, one most people never even know exists. You've stopped living in reaction to how others see you and instead begun to embody who you actually are. And with that shift, something unexplainable begins to unfold. You start to radiate a different kind of energy. It's not loud. It doesn't scream for attention. It's not about trying to be more desirable or pretending to be unbothered. It's subtle, the kind of presence that speaks louder than words ever could. You're no longer bending yourself into shapes to fit other people's expectations. You're standing in your truth, fully rooted, fully aware, fully aligned, and people can feel it. Because attraction isn't just about looks or charm. It's not about having the perfect life or the perfect words. True attraction, the kind that pulls people in without effort, comes from energy. And the rarest kind of energy in today's world is emotional sovereignty. The ability to sit with yourself, to hold your own, to not depend on anyone else to make you feel like you matter. That energy, that's magnetic. You don't need to play games or act mysterious. You don't need to chase attention or prove your worth. Your silence becomes powerful, your standards become sacred, and your peace becomes your most noticeable feature. When you walk into a room, people may not understand why they're drawn to you. They'll just know there's something different. You're not trying to get anything from anyone. You're simply being whole, calm, centered. Ironically, this is when people start coming toward you. Not because you're demanding it, but because you're no longer needing it. There's no desperation, no anxiety, no emotional reaching, just presence, just peace. Just you, finally at home in your own life, and that kind of self-possession is rare. It stands out, it commands respect, and it attracts everything that's meant for you without you having to chase a single thing. Part 5. Practical Self-Mastery. Once you've stopped running from solitude and started sitting with it, you'll notice something shift, not just emotionally, but mentally. The fog begins to lift, the noise fades, and in its place, there's space. Space to rebuild, space to become. This is where practical self-mastery begins. Because peace isn't something you stumble into, it's something you build, deliberately, quietly, one small action at a time. The first step isn't complicated, but it is uncomfortable. Discipline over distraction. Most people don't hate being alone, they hate what it reveals. So they fill the silence with scrolling, streaming, snacking, or reaching out to people they don't even like just to avoid the feeling of emptiness. But when you stop medicating discomfort with distraction, you start to develop resilience. It begins by noticing your reflexes, the urge to check your phone when you're bored, the need to be busy all the time. Self-mastery starts with awareness. From there, you begin to design your solitude with purpose. You wake up and choose a morning ritual that doesn't just prepare you for the day, but connects you to yourself. Journaling, stretching, walking, reading, not because a guru said it would make you successful, but because it gives your mind clarity and your body peace. You choose one skill, just one, and commit to learning it, not for performance or validation, but to prove to yourself that you can do hard things, that you can stay focused when no one is watching. You become more mindful of what you consume, not just food, but information, energy, conversation. You stop feeding your mind with endless opinions, arguments, or highlight reels of other people's lives. Instead, you nourish yourself with books that sharpen you, podcasts that challenge you, conversations that stretch you. Because when you're building a life on your own terms, input becomes everything. You don't let junk shape your mind, you guard your gates. And little by little, you begin to trust yourself again. You follow through on the promises you make to yourself. You keep your word, even in private. You no longer wait for motivation. You rely on structure. You no longer need accountability. You've become your own source of stability. That's self-mastery. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, but it creates a kind of internal gravity, a grounded energy that no chaos can shake. And from that place, everything changes, not because the world shifts, but because you do. You're no longer waiting to be saved. You've become the source. That's the kind of strength solitude makes possible, when it's met with intention. 6. Walking the Stoic path. When the noise of the world fades and you're left alone with your thoughts, what rises to the surface is not just emotion, it's philosophy. Not in the academic sense, but in the practical, raw, daily practice of how you think, how you respond, and what you choose to carry. This is where Stoicism becomes more than just an ancient school of thought. It becomes a way of life. A quiet framework for navigating solitude, self-discovery, and inner strength without losing yourself in the chaos of modern life. Marcus Aurelius, writing in the solitude of an emperor's private thoughts, said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." These words are simple, but they hold the key to emotional sovereignty. Because once you accept that you cannot control who leaves, who stays, who loves you back, or who doesn't, and instead focus entirely on what you can control, your responses, your habits, your inner life, you start to reclaim energy you used to waste on things far beyond your reach. The Stoics didn't fear being alone. They saw it as an opportunity to cultivate virtue. Epictetus taught that our only true possession is our ability to choose our response. He believed that external things, relationships, money, even reputation, were fleeting. The only thing that truly belongs to us is how we think, how we act, and how we show up in the face of what life throws at us. When you embrace solitude from this lens, it stops feeling like a punishment and starts feeling like preparation. Every quiet moment becomes a chance to strengthen your inner foundation. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And how often do we waste time chasing people who don't see us, running after approval that changes nothing, delaying the work of becoming because we fear the silence of our own growth? Stoicism asks us to stop outsourcing our peace and begin living with deliberate, grounded clarity, even if that means walking alone for a while. The Stoic path isn't about shutting down your feelings or pretending not to care. It's about making peace with life's impermanence. It's about seeing solitude not as a gap, but as a gift, the kind that strips away everything false so you can stand in what's real, your principles, your values, your character, and when the storm comes, as it always does, you won't crumble, because you've built a self the world can't shake. Part 7. Relationships after Wholeness. There's something quietly revolutionary about entering a relationship not from a place of need, but from a place of wholeness. When you've spent real time in solitude, not just being alone, but becoming in that aloneness, your standards shift, your pace slows, your eyes clear. You're no longer seeking someone to complete you because you've already done the work of completing yourself. And that simple change, from needing to choosing, transforms everything about how you love and who you allow into your life. When you're whole, relationships stop being about rescue. You're not looking for someone to distract you from your wounds or to make you feel worthy. You've already faced your shadows in solitude, and you've done the hard work of embracing them. So when someone new enters your life, you don't hand them the job of fixing what you never fixed in yourself. Instead, you offer your presence, your attention, your peace, not as a performance, but as a natural extension of the grounded life you've built on your own. And in turn, you expect the same. Not perfection, but self-awareness. Not constant attention, but mutual respect. Not empty promises, but emotional maturity. You begin to recognize the difference between chemistry and chaos, between passion and peace. You no longer confuse unpredictability with love. You've tasted stillness and you value it. So now, if someone disturbs your peace more than they nurture it, you let them go. Not out of anger, but out of alignment. Wholeness also changes how you handle conflict. You don't collapse under tension. You don't abandon your voice to keep the connection. You can express your needs without guilt. You can hold space for disagreement without taking it personally, and you can walk away when necessary, not as a threat, but as an act of self-respect. Because when you've spent time alone learning how to love yourself, you don't negotiate with anyone who treats that love as optional. The truth is, the best relationships aren't built on dependency. They're built on two people who are already standing on solid ground, choosing to walk beside each other. They enhance each other's peace. They don't provide it. They challenge each other's minds but never threaten each other's worth. And most importantly, they allow room for growth, not just together but independently too. When you're whole, love becomes sacred, not because it saves you, but because you no longer need saving. You've already done that for yourself. Part 8. The final chapter. Walking forward in strength. At some point, the silence you once feared becomes the space you protect. The solitude that felt empty becomes sacred, and the version of you who once waited for others to choose them is long gone. You've walked a quiet road, one most people avoid, and in doing so you've built something unshakable. Not the kind of success that shows up in numbers or followers, but the kind that lives in your chest. A calm, a clarity, a confidence that no one gave you because it was yours all along. This is where the journey turns into a lifestyle. Not just healing for the sake of feeling better, but evolving for the sake of living better. Not chasing relationships to feel loved, but moving through life as someone who is love, for themselves and for the world around them. You no longer exist to be chosen, you choose. What aligns, what expands you, what honors the self you worked so hard to meet. And that doesn't mean your life is free of loneliness or longing. You're still human, you still feel. But now, those feelings don't define your worth or your direction. They come and go like weather, and you remain steady like the sky beneath them. This is emotional freedom. This is what peace looks like when it's earned, not bought, not borrowed, not dependent on the mood or actions of others. You begin to walk differently through the world. Your pace is slower, more intentional. You don't force things, you don't grasp. You trust the process because you've lived it. You've seen how things fall away to make room for better. You've learned to let go without bitterness. And you've come to understand that real growth doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like rest, stillness, saying no, saying nothing, saying yes only to what feels real. In this final chapter, you realize there is no final chapter, just layers of self that continue to reveal themselves. Just seasons of solitude and connection, building and releasing, holding on and letting go. But now, you're not afraid of those changes. You're grounded in them, because everything you've walked through has shown you one thing. You can trust yourself to handle what comes. You are no longer the person who feared being alone. You are the person who became whole in the silence, who built strength in stillness, who now attracts from alignment, not desperation. And maybe the most powerful thing you'll ever learn is this: you were never incomplete to begin with. You just hadn't spent enough time alone to remember who you really are. Thank you for walking this path with me, and for being a part of Psychresto Mind, where clarity, strength, and self-mastery aren't just ideas, they're a way of life. If this spoke to something real in you, there's more waiting. Watch the next video on your screen. Your journey is only just beginning.